Two sisters, separated by tragedy and adopted into different families, spent decades believing they might never see each other again. A fire tore their lives apart, leaving behind questions that seemed destined to remain unanswered. But when an old pendant and a series of unexpected clues reignite hope, Evelyn embarks on an emotional journey to uncover the truth. What follows is a story of resilience, heartbreak, and healing. A tale that proves the unbreakable bond of family can endure even the most devastating separations. As Evelyn and Maggie piece together the fragments of their shared past, they not only face their deepest fears, but also rediscover the power of love and connection. Prepare to be drawn into a narrative filled with twists, raw emotions, and the relentless pursuit of closure. This is more than a story about reunion. It's a testament to hope, forgiveness, and the strength to rebuild what was lost. The cold wind blew through the narrow streets of a town forgotten by time. Amid the yellowish glow of old streetlights, Evelyn walked with hesitant steps, clutching her coat tightly against her chest. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk, as if searching for something she couldn't quite name. Since childhood, she had carried an inexplicable void, a persistent feeling that a part of her was missing, a lost piece she had never been able to find. Evelyn had always known there was something incomplete about her story. She had been adopted at the age of 4, and despite the genuine love of her adoptive parents, questions about her origins remained unanswered. The only memory she had of her life before then was a face blurred by time but marked by familiar eyes and a smile that, somehow, comforted her even without a name. That night, sitting in her room, Evelyn opened the old wooden box she had found in the basement of her adoptive home. Inside were yellowed letters, faded photographs, and a necklace with a star-shaped pendant. Among the papers, one note stood out. It was written in shaky handwriting, but the words pulsed with emotion. "I will always love you, Margaret." Evelyn felt a lump in her throat. That name brought a strange sensation, as if it echoed from a distant place in her memory. She vaguely remembered someone calling out for Margaret amidst the chaos. Voices mixed with the sound of sirens and the crackling of flames. Could this be the sister she had been told about? Or just an illusion fed by the longing for a forgotten past? Her mind raced, stirring fragmented memories and suppressed emotions. The search for answers had become inevitable. In the following days, Evelyn threw herself into research. She scoured old records, visited libraries, and searched online archives. Each clue seemed to lead to a dead end, but she refused to give up. Her instincts told her she was close to something important. On a rainy afternoon, while flipping through documents in a public archive, she found a newspaper article dated 1985. Children separated after tragic fire in family home. The headline sent chills down her spine. The photo beside it showed two girls with penetrating eyes and timid smiles. It was like looking at her own reflection and at the same time at someone she hadn't seen in decades. The article described the devastating fire that had destroyed the house where Evelyn and her sister had lived. Both had survived but were separated and adopted by different families. Evelyn's hands trembled. Finally, Evelyn began to piece together the scattered fragments of her story. The face once blurred in her memory now had a name, Margaret. Gradually, the features became clearer, as if emerging from a veil of mist. With this newfound clarity, her determination to find her sister grew stronger, to fill the void she had carried for so many years. Fear mixed with hope as she planned her next move. Evelyn and Margaret's childhood was marked by deep bonds and shared moments that seemed to last forever. They played in the backyard, invented fantastic stories, and shared secrets that only sisters could understand. Evelyn, 2 years older, always felt responsible for protecting Margaret. Margaret, in turn, saw Evelyn as a heroine, her source of security and inspiration. On the night of the fire, everything changed. The flames quickly consumed the wooden house, forcing the girls to flee in panic. Evelyn remembered holding Margaret's hand tightly as they descended the smoke-filled stairs. But in the chaos, an explosion separated them. Evelyn was pulled away by a firefighter, while Margaret disappeared into the flames and the despair. The following days were a blur. Evelyn was taken to a temporary shelter, crying for her sister and the parents she would never see again. Margaret, on the other hand, woke up in a hospital, scared and confused, not knowing where Evelyn had gone. The years passed, and each followed a different path. Evelyn was adopted by a couple who lived in a small town, where she grew up surrounded by love but with a constant void. Margaret had a harder journey, moving through several foster homes before finally finding stability. While Evelyn buried herself in studies and tried to build a balanced life, Margaret struggled with insecurity and the fear of being abandoned again. Evelyn became meticulous and determined, always searching for answers, while Margaret learned to shut herself off emotionally to avoid further pain. Despite their differences, both carried invisible scars. Evelyn had recurring nightmares about the fire and woke up in cold sweats, feeling powerless for not having saved Margaret. Margaret, on the other hand, developed an emotional resistance that made her distant from people, but deep down, she still longed to reconnect with something or someone that would give her life meaning. There were moments when Margaret sat at night, looking at the only physical reminder of her childhood, a necklace with a star-shaped pendant, identical to the one Evelyn found years later. She held it tightly, wondering if her sister was still alive, if she also thought about her. Distance and time created barriers between them, but fate seemed determined to bring them back together. Now, Evelyn was getting closer to solving the mystery and facing whatever their reunion might bring. Meanwhile, Margaret also felt that something was about to change, even without knowing that her past was finally coming to meet her. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, staring at the old pendant resting in her palm. The star-shaped charm caught the dim light, casting tiny reflections on the walls. It was the only link to a past that felt more like a dream than a memory. She had examined it countless times, hoping to uncover a secret she might have overlooked. Tonight, however, it felt heavier, as if it carried a message she wasn't ready to hear. Days had passed since she found the newspaper article about the fire, but the image of the two girls' faces lingered in her mind. The resemblance was undeniable. Margaret, the name haunted her, echoing through fragments of memories she had long buried. Evelyn's search for answers had become an obsession, and each new clue seemed to draw her closer to the truth. Unable to sleep, she grabbed her laptop and began scrolling through social media. She typed in variations of the name Margaret Sullivan, filtering by age and location. Most of the profiles led to dead ends, images of strangers who shared nothing in common with the girl in her memories. But just as she was about to close her laptop, a photo stopped her. It was a woman standing by a lakeside, her dark hair swept by the wind. Something about her eyes felt achingly familiar. Evelyn's heart raced as she clicked on the profile. The name read Maggie Sullivan. Her breath caught. Could Maggie be short for Margaret? Evelyn scrolled through Maggie's posts, piecing together fragments of her life. She worked at a small bookstore, often sharing photos of old novels and handwritten notes. But what stood out most were the captions. Lines about longing, loss, and searching for something or someone missing. One post in particular sent chills down Evelyn's spine. It was a picture of a pendant, almost identical to hers, with the caption, "Some things tie us to our past, even when we don't remember why." Evelyn clutched her necklace, her pulse quickening. It was too much to be a coincidence. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What if she was wrong? What if Maggie didn't remember her, or worse, didn't want to? The fear of rejection tightened around her chest, but the hope was stronger. She sent a message, "Hi Maggie, I know this might sound strange, but I think we might have something in common. I'd really like to talk if you're open to it." Hours passed without a response, each minute stretching endlessly. Evelyn tried to distract herself, but her eyes kept returning to the screen. Finally, a notification appeared. Maggie had replied, "Hi, Evelyn. I don't usually respond to messages like this, but something about your name feels familiar. What do you mean by something in common?" Evelyn's fingers trembled as she typed her reply. She briefly explained the fire, the adoption, and the pendant. She ended the message with a picture of her necklace, hoping it would spark recognition. When Maggie responded, her words were hesitant yet filled with emotion. "I don't know what to say. I've been searching for answers too, and your story sounds so much like mine. I think we need to meet." The words hit Evelyn like a wave, washing over years of uncertainty and longing. She agreed to meet Maggie the following weekend, but as the day approached, doubts crept in. Would Maggie be the sister she remembered, or had time and distance turned them into strangers? Evelyn spent the days leading up to the meeting replaying memories of their childhood. She could still hear Margaret's laughter echoing through the halls of their old home, still feel the warmth of her tiny hand clutching hers. But those memories were fragile, clouded by years of separation. What if they no longer fit? The morning of the meeting arrived, and Evelyn dressed carefully, choosing the necklace as her only accessory. It felt like armor, a symbol of the bond she hoped still existed. She drove to the cafe where they had agreed to meet, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Evelyn could barely breathe as she parked the car in front of the cafe. Her heart pounded against her chest. For days, she had imagined this moment, rehearsing words and trying to prepare for every possibility. But now that she was here, the reality felt overwhelming. Outside, through the large cafe window, she saw Maggie sitting near the door. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and she absent-mindedly stirred a cup of tea. The image was both familiar and strange. Evelyn wondered if this woman was really her sister or just a shadow of what they once were. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and walked to the door. The bell chimed as she entered, catching Maggie's attention, who immediately looked up. For a moment, time stood still. They stared at each other, as if trying to recognize one another through the marks left by the years. "Evelyn?" Maggie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn nodded, unable to find words. In an instant, Maggie stood up and ran to her, wrapping her in a tight hug. Evelyn felt the warmth of her sister's body and the faint scent of tea. It was real. They were here, together again. Tears streamed down both their faces as they pulled apart, but the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if words were unnecessary in that moment. They sat down and began talking, hesitant at first, but soon the words flowed like a dam finally bursting. Evelyn shared stories of her adoption, her loving parents, but also the constant emptiness. Maggie talked about her unstable childhood, the temporary homes, and how she had always felt like something was missing. The star-shaped pendants were placed on the table at the same time, bringing both smiles and tears. "I never took this off," Maggie said, holding the pendant. "It was the only thing that made me feel like I belonged somewhere." Evelyn clutched her own pendant tightly. "Me too. It kept me connected to you, even when I didn't know where you were." The conversation shifted to memories of the past. Playing in the backyard, whispering at night until they fell asleep, and dreaming about the future. They laughed as they recalled the small mischiefs they had made and cried as they remembered the fire and the fear they felt that night. But as the hours passed, the tone changed. Hard questions arose. "Why did it take so long?" Maggie asked, her voice filled with pain. "I looked for you. I tried, but nothing. I thought you had forgotten me." Evelyn shook her head quickly. "I never forgot you. I didn't know where to start. And then I was afraid to find out you were fine without me, or that you didn't want to see me." Maggie wiped her tears and took Evelyn's hand. "I always wanted to find you. Always." Those words broke the last barrier between them. Evelyn felt the weight of years of separation begin to lift. They kept talking until the cafe started to close, yet it still felt like there was so much more to say. As they left, Maggie held Evelyn's hand, just like she used to when they were children. "Let's not lose each other again, okay?" she said with a shy smile. Evelyn smiled back. "Never again." That night, as Evelyn drove home, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. She knew there was still work to do to rebuild their relationship, but that first step had been taken. The reunion wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning of something new and wonderful. And as she glanced at the pendant around her neck, Evelyn finally believed that the pieces of her past were starting to fit together. For the first time, the future felt full of possibilities. Silence filled Evelyn's small apartment as she carefully arranged the papers scattered across the table. Old newspaper clippings, adoption records, and printed conversations with Maggie were stacked like a testament to the journey they had taken to finally reunite. But now, faced with so many answers, new questions began to surface. Maggie sat on the couch, holding a cup of tea between her hands. Her eyes examined the old photos Evelyn had found, images from a time before the fire. "I don't remember these photos," Maggie admitted, running her finger gently over a picture of the two of them hugging in front of their old house. "But I feel like I know this place. Like I was there yesterday." Evelyn sat beside her, lightly touching her sister's arm. "That's how I felt my whole life. Incomplete memories, scattered pieces. I thought that when I found you, everything would make sense. But now—" She let the sentence fade, her eyes fixed on the image. Maggie sighed. "Now it feels like there are even more gaps to fill." She set the cup on the table and held Evelyn's hands. "But at least we're together to do it. That's already a start." Their conversation stretched late into the night. They shared their experiences after the separation. Evelyn spoke about the love and support of her adoptive parents, but also about the silent guilt of feeling like she had left Maggie behind. Maggie, on the other hand, revealed the challenges of growing up in foster homes, always afraid of being abandoned again. "I never felt at home," Maggie admitted, her voice breaking. "Even when I was finally adopted, I always felt like something was wrong, like I didn't belong. Now I know why." She looked at Evelyn, her eyes brimming with tears. "Because part of me was with you." Evelyn wiped away a lone tear. "I felt the same way. No matter how loved I was, there was this hole that nothing could fill." She squeezed Maggie's hand tighter. "But now we can fix this. We can move forward together." The next day, they decided to visit the place where it all began, the ruins of what had once been their home. The land was abandoned, overtaken by weeds and time. The burnt walls had been torn down, but parts of the foundation remained visible, like scars of a past that refused to disappear. Maggie walked slowly through the wreckage, touching what was left of the walls. "I remember this," she whispered. "This is where we used to play hide and seek." She stopped near what seemed to be the old living room. "And this is where I lost you. I screamed for you, but the smoke. I couldn't see anything." Evelyn shivered at the words. "I screamed for you too, but they pulled me out before I could find you." She crouched down and picked up a piece of charred brick. "I spent years wondering what more I could have done. If only I had held your hand tighter." Maggie knelt beside her. "You did what you could. We were just kids. We couldn't fight that." She placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "What matters is that we survived. And that we're here now." The moment was interrupted by a distant sound, perhaps a branch snapping under the weight of an animal. The sisters turned, but there was nothing but silence. Evelyn smiled nervously. I think this place still scares me a little. Maybe it's just a reminder, Maggie replied, that no matter how broken something seems, there's always a way to rebuild. In the following days, they started attending therapy together, determined to process the memories and scars they carried. The sessions brought tears and difficult revelations, but also relief and understanding. Evelyn learned to let go of guilt and allow herself to feel happiness for the reunion. Maggie, in turn, began to trust again, to open her heart to the possibility of a lighter future. They also found new ways to reconnect. They took trips to places they had dreamed of visiting as children, recreated recipes they had learned from their biological mother, and even started a project to help others separated by adoption or tragedy reunite. One evening, as they looked at newly developed photos of their recent adventures, Maggie turned to Evelyn. Do you think we'll ever stop feeling like two pieces trying to fit together? Evelyn thought for a moment before answering. Maybe. Or maybe that's what makes us who we are, always searching, always growing. She smiled. But now, at least, we're searching together. Maggie smiled back and took her sister's hand. Together, always. And with that, they began planning their next steps, knowing that although the wounds of the past might never completely disappear, they were finally on the path to healing. The morning sun softly lit the living room as Evelyn and Maggie packed the last donation boxes for the project they had started together. It was a small but cozy space, filled with books, photographs, and symbolic objects that told the sisters' journey. The project, called Lost Ties, helped people separated by adoption or tragedies reunite with their loved ones. As Maggie labeled envelopes, Evelyn reviewed the files of new cases. Can you believe we've already helped 5 families reunite this month? Evelyn commented with a smile. Maggie looked up and smiled. I believe it, because we know exactly what it means to lose someone and the strength that comes from finding them again. She took a deep breath, touching the star-shaped pendant hanging from her neck. It's more than a project. It's our story being told in different ways. The project brought purpose to their lives, but also challenges. Some days, the client's stories reopened painful memories. On one particularly hard morning, Maggie found a letter from a young woman looking for her lost sister. The similarity to her own story was overwhelming, and she needed a few hours to process her emotions. Evelyn found her sitting in a nearby park, watching the leaves fall from the trees. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside her. Yes and no, Maggie replied, forcing a smile. Sometimes I think about the time we lost, the birthdays we didn't celebrate, the important moments we didn't share. She sighed. I know we're making up for it now, but sometimes it still hurts. Evelyn took Maggie's hand. I feel that too. But look at what we're building. We're not just making up for lost time. We're helping other people avoid what we went through. That doesn't erase the pain, but it turns it into something powerful. Evelyn's words brought comfort, and Maggie smiled. You always know what to say. Over the months, the sisters continued to grow stronger, both individually and together. They spoke at conferences, were invited to radio shows, and even began writing a book about their experiences. Each step reinforced the bond they had restored. But the real test came when they received an unexpected invitation. The social worker who handled their case in childhood wanted to meet them. The news stirred conflicting emotions. Evelyn felt gratitude but also fear. Maggie, on the other hand, was hesitant and suspicious. What if she knows something we're not ready to hear? Maggie asked the night before the meeting. Then we'll listen together, Evelyn replied. Just like we've faced everything so far. The meeting took place in a small community office. The social worker, a woman with gray hair and a gentle smile, welcomed them with a warm hug. She brought old documents and records detailing the efforts made to keep the sisters together after the fire. You were separated by circumstances beyond our control, she explained. But I never stopped thinking about you. When I heard you had reunited, I felt I had to see you. I wanted to apologize for not doing more. The sisters were moved by her sincerity. Maggie spoke first. You did the best you could. We know that now. And thanks to that, we were able to find each other again. The social worker smiled, her eyes welling with tears. Seeing you together is everything I could have hoped for. You are proof that love and hope can overcome any obstacle. Evelyn looked at Maggie and then at the social worker. Thank you for never giving up on us, even when the circumstances seemed impossible. The conversation brought closure to another chapter of their past. And as they left the office, Evelyn and Maggie felt ready to move forward with more clarity and purpose. In the following months, the Lost Ties project grew, and the sisters began traveling to share their experiences at conferences. On one of these trips, Maggie met a man named Daniel, who worked at a shelter for adopted children. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and Evelyn watched her sister open up to love in a way she had never imagined. Evelyn also found space for love. She met Lucas, a journalist who had covered their project story. Lucas's support and understanding brought lightness to her life, something she hadn't realized she needed until then. As their personal lives flourished, the sisters continued to support each other. At a dinner celebrating the anniversary of their project, Maggie gave an emotional toast to this project, which began with two lost sisters and turned into a beacon for so many others. And to Evelyn, who never gave up looking for me, even when it seemed impossible. Evelyn wiped away a tear and raised her glass. And to Maggie, for being the light I didn't even know I needed. Together, always. The room echoed with applause, but for the sisters, that moment was intimate, a confirmation that the past had been transformed into something beautiful. As the evening came to an end, Evelyn looked at the star-shaped pendant around her neck. It was no longer a symbol of loss, but one of hope, of a future built with love, courage, and bonds that, despite everything, had never truly been broken. And so, with their stories intertwined once again, Evelyn and Maggie continued their journey, knowing that every step would take them even farther together. If this story touched your heart, give it a like to support more inspiring content like this. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep following heartfelt stories. See you in the next video.